with a whole lot of truth. The Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and today's guest is somebody who I've known about for a very, very long time. She has quite the interesting story, so I'm happy to bring her on to tell it herself. Please welcome to the show, Katie Wright.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Erin.
So, Katie, tell us a little bit about this whole story because I know, I had been involved with an organization called Autism One for a long time. You had been involved with an organization called Autism Speaks, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle, shall we call it, in the autism world. So I would love to hear you tell us that story from your perspective.
Yes. It's just, my son was developing really typically. He was very physically active, appropriate. He had maybe over 100 words, a little bit over 18 months, pointing. Everything was normal. And for so long, I had to drag around a cassette to play this at doctor's. They never would believe me. And then he got the DTaP, HIB, HEB, Prevnar, and he had bad reactions before, like hours of screaming, but nothing. This was the one, and screaming, like unbelievable screaming, and it went on for 10 hours. And super high 103-degree fever. That went on almost all night. And after that, it was a pretty steep spiral downward where he lost all his words, never really spoke again, and then stopped pointing, was unable to remember how to go upstairs. So he lost all his gross motor abilities, and he couldn't recognize anybody anymore except his father and I. So it was very dramatic for me. And at first I didn't realize that that's not the same with everybody. Some kids are like that at the beginning, or autistic. And then anyway, so mine was very dramatic. So the irony is my parents only founded Autism Speaks because of what happened. I mean, so dramatic. And they were horrified that no doctors could explain it. And that's why they founded Autism Speaks. But then they kind of got co-opted by very conservative researchers and a very genes-based agenda. And at the time, I was doing a lot of interviews and a lot of press and media and for them, and I was happy to do it. But then it just got to a point where I felt like none of this is achieving anything. There's no good research coming out of this. And the last thing was there was supposed to be this autism treatment network, which I thought, great, I can really contribute. I can be part of this with the parents because mentors really helped me. And when they fired me from that, I was just, then there's no point. And I never tell anyone what to do. I just say I did this, and maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. But it was the research. They spent almost $50 million on research. Pretty much 95% of it is terrible. So I just had to, oh, and also they wanted me never to talk about vaccines. Sorry.
Yes.
I used to work with gay men in the early 90s in pre-counseling at my internship. It's like what saying to me then, don't talk about HIV. Of course you have to talk about vaccines if you're talking about autism. So then I just realized that my parents really they really believe the ultra conservative researchers, and very sad. They've achieved nothing. So yeah.
Yeah, so it can be really difficult to navigate, as a parent with a new diagnosis, you come in and you're concerned, obviously, about your child, and you want to do anything and everything to help them. And so, for some parents, they are navigating down a biomedical route.
Yes.
And other parents go into a doctor's office who might give them the diagnosis and a swift kick in the rear end and say, go to ABA, or, there's other services for you.
Right.
But not offer any kind of assistance for the real symptoms that these kids are suffering from.
Rarely, yes. very rarely.
So ultimately, um, how did you navigate some of that when you were dealing with, parents who were, I presume, very well-meaning, but
Yes,
unfortunately misguided?
yes. Well, so we were really by the book. We wanted to do exactly what at the time it was Dr. Agnes Whitaker, who was a psychiatrist at Columbia Presbyterian. And since I've discovered that there's just way too many psychologists and psychologists in the field because they see it almost entirely as behavioral. So she recommended to us like intense ABA speech OT. And they basically promise, like within 6 months, you're going to see a big difference. Okay, he's worse. He's steadily worse. And he's sick all the time. And they had no answers and just nothing. And it's like malpractice to be almost willfully ignorant about, he clearly had pandas looking back, to be so willfully ignorant and just basically say, well, that's the way it is. Um, and be unwilling to have the conversation about vaccines. It's just, I feel like if you're not one of the very lucky, and I think maybe 10% are who get ABA and speech and OT and everything gets better. If that's not you, you're on your own.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about some of the research that Autism Speaks was looking into, because from my understanding, this was primarily looking at genetics. Is that
Yes,
true?
yes. They convinced my dad, Steve Shear from Sick Kids Hospital Toronto is a big genomist. And he convinced my dad that they can subtype autism genetically and then, quote unquote, plug in the drug. I said to my dad, you can't subtype autism genetically because, yes, there are these odd variants, but they're also in the general population of people who don't have autism. And he was adamant that this would work. And I mean, I think autism is like alcoholism. There's so many different factors. You're not going to find a genetic gene. I mean, like for example, I think about the comedian Kathy Griffin. She was terrified because literally everyone's an alcoholic, and the decision she made is, I'm never going to drink. And she's not. So it wasn't inevitable if she never has alcohol. So I think a lot of our kids like that, they have a predisposition, but it takes something to manifest it. So yeah, so Steve Shearer said he could, and anyways, it was ridiculous, and they spent a fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars, like not hundreds, I'm sorry, like 10 million, 20 million, maybe double that, and of course they didn't find any way to phenotype genetically. They would say it was a huge scientific win because they found all these rare variants, and we just need to do more research. But oh, and then they say we found a lot of kids with like genetic disorders. Okay, like I think there's a test for Fragile X right now, and it's like available to anybody. And the diseases that they were studying really aren't autism. Rett isn't autism. Tuberous sclerosis isn't autism. So I think it's a big red herring. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's really where all of it. And then Jerry Dawson at the time, she's a psychologist at UNC, and she was really into early intervention, and she put a ton of money in that. But then she would say to me, I never saw kids like Christian. And I think she mistook that for they don't exist, because I said, well, I would be in one of your studies because he's so much more, he can't speak and has GI problems. And what I find is most of those early intervention studies are done with healthy, high functioning kids, and then they generalize it to everybody. So those were the two areas. And I felt that was leaving like 80% of people behind.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so much of the research really hones in on a specific population
Mm-hmm.
or looks at specific treatments, but maybe the kids that are being funneled into that treatment
Mm-hmm.
are, they're not receiving other biomedical treatments or,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whatever the case may be. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the data is kind of flawed from the get-go because
Yeah.
so much of these conversations are they don't take a more broad perspective, like you said. Like some people, the general population has a lot of these genetic SNPs,
Mhm.
but
Yes,
but we're not looking for those SNPs in the
right.
general population. We're only
Yes,
looking for them in kids with autism.
yes. And that's, they're thinking of it like Huntington's disease. Like they will find, okay, there's the gene, this is why this happened. It's not like that. I think even 20 years ago, that was a willfully naive um, characterization of autism. It's just absurd that they even thought that at all, but they did. So, what was the other thing they wasted money on? Oh my God. Yeah, it was early intervention, genetics, genomics. Oh, and they would IBIS. They gave money to IBIS, which was Jeremy Piven at North Carolina. I think it was like all in all, $75 million project to do brain imaging of siblings of kids with autism, like every other month or something. Hugely expensive. And they found like, yes, after whatever 2 years, there was a difference in the brain. But they refused, because it was confusing, they refused to collect medical records, vaccine records. So they're taking a picture of the brain before autism and then after. So really sad, because to do a better study wouldn't have cost that much more at all.
Mhm.
But obviously, I think they're afraid of what they find, so they keep these studies very narrow.
Yeah. And so as a parent, walk me through what it was like for you knowing that your son had regressed post-vaccination
Mhm.
and then not being able to tell other parents about that.
Right. Like the first thing you get is a lot of shut ups. Don't talk about this. Like a pediatrician said to me, don't talk about this. This is going to scare other parents. And I don't want to do that, obviously. But the overall attitude was like, this will go away if we don't talk about it. And it's such, like when your kids, it's like, you can't see me. It's like that. And I remember telling my dad, I was talking to people at the CDC. I said, Dad, these people they're not smart. They can't even answer basic questions. And he's like, you're wrong. And I'm going to go down there and I'm going to talk to them. And then he comes back. And I think it was the first time in his life, he's like, you were right. This is who it is. You were right. And he wanted to talk to them about what they were doing for autism. And the guy who was running it said, oh, this is 2004. We don't want to talk about that because it'll just scare people. And he's like, well, shouldn't you be doing like what are the signs are, and kind of educating people? Is like, to educate them is to make trouble. So that's what my mother did really well. She created more awareness, like this is what this is. And
Mhm.
it's not just in the book that you're born this way, it can be different ways. And when they started doing that, the CDC was kind of shamed into addressing autism, but they really I just didn't want the idea that you don't speak about it, it's not happening.
This is what my nightstand looked like for over 10 years. Melatonin was a non-negotiable. Hi, I'm Erin, host of the Remedy Revolution podcast and a board-certified holistic health practitioner. I spent years learning everything there is to know about health, and my sleep was still a struggle. Then I tried red light therapy. After just 1 week, my sleep completely changed. I started sleeping much harder and longer than I had in years. And if I was woken up, suddenly I was actually able to fall back asleep. But the weird part was I kept waking up groggy. So I started taking a little less melatonin, but I was still groggy. Then one night I fell asleep before I even took it, and I slept amazing. I haven't needed a single dose of melatonin or any other sleep aid since. Now I use the Aurora Pro 3 to 5 nights a week for about 20 minutes, and I'm finally waking up clear and rested every single morning. I'm telling you, if sleep is a challenge for you, do not wait. Run, click the link below, and get started on fixing your sleep. Yeah, and I think additionally there was kind of this real push towards the acceptance of neurodiversity.
Yes, yes,
And I
yes.
think ultimately that, is still at play now.
Mhm, mhm.
So tell me your thoughts on some of that and why you think these conversations
Oh,
often get shifted towards that more
yes.
narrow mindset, I
I
guess.
think Autism Speaks and IAC just totally derailed the all the research and the agenda and made it about very, very high functioning people who were verbal. And I think a lot of these high functioning people are not happy, they're lonely, they feel misunderstood. And then also for some people who probably aren't even autistic but are lonely and quirky, they want to belong and they think, oh, this is cool. It's a disability. We're all together and it's not me. I can demand that you accommodate me. You fix this for me. Um, and I think the research community liked that because that's very safe research. And they took the agenda from it being, and there would be no Autism Speaks if Christian was high functioning, if they wouldn't have done it. They took the agenda from fixing and helping kids to accept it as it is. And it's your problem. And it was so funny at the time. People would like text me awful things and like you're controlling your son and ASAN, the Association of Self Advocacy. And I invited a whole bunch of them over, and I said, "Come over, and then you can tell me if you think I'm controlling him and telling him what to do." And so they came over. They couldn't leave fast enough. They're so hard. They saw him have a meltdown because he was having GI pain, and they saw that he could not. He just felt awful, and then it wasn't. He didn't. His problem wasn't me speaking for him. Put it that way. They understood that wasn't the problem. Um, but these people got to be very powerful. And then before we know it, Catherine Lord, who's a very famous and incompetent researcher, was the one who collapsed autism and Asperger's together. And as a result of that, 60% of all autism research is done on the highest, healthiest functioning people. And it's atrocious. It's absolutely atrocious. And to this day, I don't know why she didn't lose her license and why she's still working in that capacity. So that really kind of ruined research for kids like mine or kids who like yours who have PANS. It all these they filled IAC with all these self advocates, like dozen of them,
Mhm.
and there was nobody who was a parent of a child like me. And they became, in a weird way, reverse politically correct, saying like people they have to speak for our community. I'm like, well, he's not speaking for me. R.A. Naiman isn't speaking for Christian. Um, so that was in, and that I think there's a great way to address that. I think it's easy to address that, like have them meet our kids and speak to them about the real problems we have, and that they were afraid to do that. Um, and the media loved this, the high functioning people. So it really got derailed, and there was no good leadership to keep it on track. It was
Mhm.
very sad. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Autism Speaks became all about acceptance.
Yeah, and I think so much of that narrative really remains, and it has branched out into these other communities, unfortunately,
Yes.
and just it causes unnecessary suffering in my
Yes.
mind because we are negating the experience of so many other people who don't fit into that narrow
Right.
label, right? So.
Right.
Um,
Yes, I agree.
so at this point, I know, you've been involved with the IACC.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that. I did sit in on a few of the meetings and listen to some,
What did you
some
think?
you
Now,
know, it
recently or before?
recently.
Okay, recently they're good. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And well, one thing that really struck me is, which is kind of similar in line with what we were talking about, is that this whole idea of diagnostic overshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have this umbrella of
Mm-hmm.
autism, when we negate even the idea of a potential PANS-PANDAS
Mm-hmm.
comorbidity,
Mm-hmm.
then we stop looking. We're not
Mm-hmm.
curious anymore.
Right. Right.
And so, tell me a
Right.
little bit about what everything that's been going on at the IACC
Well,
is doing to address that.
um, 25 years ago, my mom and I met with Francis Collins, who's the then president of NIH. And at the time, I believe they were only spending $60 million a year on autism. And my mom's like, what do I have to do for you to see progress? And he said, double our budget. And quote unquote, you will see the lights on the board. Okay, so my mom, she was relentless. I think she quadrupled the budget.
Mm.
And 5, 10, zero progress. So it's not about the money. And then I realized, okay, it's not, because in the beginning I thought they just don't have the money. And then I was looking into the research and it was horrible. So then I got interested in how do they make these decisions? So I started watching IAC to learn like these are the people at the NIH who are choosing the research, the institutional members. And I was horrified. Their understanding of autism is so minimal, and they're almost all geneticists or psychologists, and they are very interested in their niche, and they don't really want to hear from parents like me. Um, they don't even want to hear about regression. So then I realized the reason we're not making any progress is because the people who are choosing the grants are totally unqualified and have an agenda. And so then I started watching it regularly. And there, in the beginning, there was Lynn Redfield, who was Redwood, I'm sorry, who was a wonderful public advocate, but she was probably the only parent, the only person in a room of like 25 people who knew anything about kids like mine. So I watched how the research agenda just became so narrow, and these people, the NIH people, were so willfully walled off. I remember when I was at Safe Minds, the Safe Minds president said, you know, I represent, 5,000 people who have severe autism families, and I'd really like to meet with the NIH person who's kind of in charge of the strategic plan. And they said, we're busy. And we're like, you know, I'm in New York and Chuck Schumer has what, like 18 million constituents. And I'll call his office and say, I want to speak about this bill. They'll give you 3 weeks from Wednesday. So to me, there was such an absence of accountability, leadership, and honestly, common human dignity, decency just to do your job, which is also interacting with the public. So at that point, I realized that there's no progress because they invest in the worst research. And the people, it's the same people over and over again who are choosing the grants, and it's their friends who are getting, it's the same, it's Emory, it's Vanderbilt, it's Yale, UCLA. It's like the same group over and over again. Yeah, so that's I realized through IAC why we're not making progress. So don't let them tell you it's money. It's really not. Um, and we just it's one of my big bugaboo. So Kennedy did a great job reforming the public membership, and now the public membership finally reflects our community. And there's a lot of parents who have kids who are severely affected, moderately affected, and just medically affected. So that's great. So there was an urgency I never saw before at IAC for like right away. They wanted to vote on sending a recommendation to Secretary Kennedy about declaring wandering an urgent issue because it's killing like 25 minimum kids a year. And the pushback from the NIH people was shocking, shocking. They were all worried about this is not how we do things. We can't decide on doing things on the spot. And if there was a motto for them in autism and the NIH would be like, we can't do it because. And as we are stuck with people who are in positions of power who are truly terrible at their job. So that's what it's come down to, very sadly. But Sylvia Fogel is the new IAC coordinator, and she's terrific. She is absolutely terrific. So I was very happy with her strategic plan. For 25 years, they put out this strategic plan about how they think the money should be invested. And pretty much every year it's the same. It's like early intervention. And I think 2 years ago, it got to the point I looked and there's like 10,000 signs of autism research, 10,000. They're all good. So I was like, you know what? If a doctor doesn't know the signs of autism, it's because he or she doesn't want to know. It's like smoking. All the research has been done. So that was the only time I think they were forced to listen to me because they said, you keep investing in a solved problem. Um, so Sylvia addressed that, the redundancy in research, which is great, and the need to do research on regression. So that's been great.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've submitted comments to IAC
Great.
primarily about the idea of pandas
Yes.
having some kind of presence under that umbrella because
Yes.
we recognize it kind of as this like redheaded stepchild, if you will.
Yes.
And so many kids with autism also
Yes.
display symptoms of pandas at one
Mm-hmm.
time or another.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mine too.
yeah, so and I hear that, from pretty much every single parent,
Yes. Right.
that, yeah, well, then they got pans and, this
Mm-hmm.
happened and that happened. Well, so if we're not talking about, the real need, particularly when it comes to mental health
Right.
diagnostics, addressing, well, does the kid have infections,
Right.
or do they
Yes.
have brain inflammation?
Yes.
All of these things might be, you know, a good thing to take a look
I said to
at.
Autism Speaks, I said, if you're going to give money, a grant, you should require that they all take like a CEU, like a 3 hour CEU and GI issues or something. And they were like, oh my God, like you're asking so much. And I said, I really don't think so because I think the problem is doctors. Like I would take my son who was normal and then all of a sudden he's closing the door or flushing the toilet 100 times a day.
Mhm.
And I'd be like, what's going on? Um, and they just said it's just part of autism. And then later, when I figured out from another parent who were so helpful to me, this was pandas. And I went into the doctor again. And I had brought like sheets of paper. I said, this is what it is. And he was like, well, that's a very um, controversial diagnosis. I said, what's good? Is diabetes controversial? No, it isn't a good or bad. It just exists. But clearly, the AAP does not want to learn about this or hear about it. So it's so much institutional deliberate neglect. Um, they'll talk to you, tell you're blue in the face about the mumps, but they don't know anything about pandas. I mean, like we saw this growing up. I grew up in Connecticut, and people who got Lyme disease were told to see a psychiatrist. So looking back, I have so much more empathy for them because nobody seemed to be interested in Lyme, which was weird, and there was no protocol. So it reminded me of that.
Mhm.
These poor Lyme people. Oh my
Mhm.
God.
Yeah, my son and I also have Lyme, so
It's a terrible
very
disorder.
familiar. Yeah.
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 Did you get any good help from a doctor in the beginning?
Not initially,
Yeah.
he was born in 2007, onset was
Hmm.
around age 4.
Hmm.
So, but we didn't really get any kind of diagnostic clue until
Right.
he was about 7.
Right.
And even then, it was at the urgency of another parent, just
Yes.
like you
Yes.
said.
That's what
Mm.
it takes because uh, the AAP is just such a sad organization. It just seems so bought and paid for. Like if you go to the website or their X account, it's all about vaccines and communicable diseases. And in 2026, communicable diseases are not, this isn't 1904 where they didn't know what causes, measles or whatever. Chronic disease, as Kennedy said, is the real issue. And I don't know. I think that they're just part of Pfizer at this point, or an arm of pharma. So yeah, it's just was crazy to me how hard it was to get help with pandas.
Well, and I think, I feel as though pandas is like what autism was maybe like 25 years ago
That's
or
a good
so,
analogy. Yeah.
because, we do have, there are more physicians that are looking into it. I'm
Yes.
involved with MAPS, for example, and
Yeah.
there's a large group of us, but the need is dire. There's so
Huge.
many kids that are
Yes.
struggling. And, in my opinion, PANS-PANDAS is far more often misdiagnosed
Yes.
than autism. And so
Yes.
that's where the urgency for me comes in.
I mean, they should be having the NIH should be having all these RFAs on pandas. And I know, and every year I go through their NIH reporter, which is a list of every single thing. I mean, they found nothing about pandas.
Mhm.
It's willful almost. And like you said, it's just too difficult to get help. It shouldn't be this difficult. And there's just too few places. Like they fund these special things called Autism Center for Excellence, and I use quotation marks there, which spend God like hundreds of millions a year, and they're hospitals that are supposed to be about medically treating people with autism. They provide no medical treatment. It's all about just diagnosis. And that would be a great place. I remember I said to someone at the NIH to set up PANS clinics so
Mhm.
you could educate people. Too controversial.
Well, and I mean, it's just so often the diagnosis becomes a mental health diagnosis.
Yes.
You would see anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
depression,
Mm-hmm.
and these kids just get on this, pharmaceutical roller coaster,
Yes.
and they don't improve because nobody's
No.
looking at their physiology.
No. Nobody's connecting all the staph infections or strep. Christian got Coxsackie, strep, staph, and never once did a doctor even ask me about this. I always have to bring it up. And then the testing, I forget, it's a while ago, but the testing for the strep was tricky, and you would get a lot of false negatives. And you also get false negatives with Lyme a lot, which
Mhm.
people don't know, and so they think they don't have it, and then they have to do like the Western blot. I think that's the second tier testing. Yeah. So I just think we're at a place which is inexcusable lack of progress and leadership from Autism Speaks and the NIH. So it just reminds me of breast cancer a little bit. Um, we were spending tons of money on breast cancer, and breast cancer survivors who are yet relatively young, active women were like, this isn't good enough. You're not making progress. And they started to fund tons of their own research. And the NIH was saying they were having progress and they were going to be left behind. And nobody was going to be advocating for them to get research money at the NIH if they weren't producing. And so they had competition. And so all of a sudden, the NIH research on breast cancer got a lot better because they were losing all support. And if there's no political support for a disease or disorder, they'll lose funding. So that's what it took. And they're like decades ahead of us. Also, ironically, it's a lot less controversial breast cancer.
Right, right. I know I can't tell you how many parents I've had tell me, some with two children, one with a cancer diagnosis and the other with a PANS-PANDAS diagnosis. And they always say to me, gosh, cancer was 1,000 times easier because the
Yeah.
public perception was
Yes.
so much, they're creating meal trains and
Yes.
donating to GoFundMe's, when you
Yes.
tell them like, oh, actually, my child just threw a rock at my head yesterday,
Yes.
and nobody,
Nobody
nobody's
cares.
hearing that.
My sister had pretty serious melanoma, 2B at 30. My dad had this cancer called Merkel cell cancer. It's terrible. It's like you have 50-50 chance of living. I don't think they had to look online one time. The doctor diagnosed it. He's like, he gave them like, I don't know, it was like a 10-point plan with like indentations and details, the big everything. Like, and if this doesn't work, we're gonna do this. Totally laid out, and this works because this, and we have a subclinic that'll help you with this. And with autism, for me and you, it sounds like, I mean, we're like, okay, your kid's autistic. Good luck. Bye. Like,
Right.
that's the end of it.
Right.
Yeah.
It should be the beginning of a conversation and
Right.
it's the
Yeah.
end of one.
It's the end of
Um,
it. Yes.
and so, I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm even telling my patients who are, early stages, diagnostic, you know, tools are, maybe helpful, but at the same time, a diagnosis is not the end of the story. And I
Oh,
think too many people, once they get a diagnosis, they think that that's it. We figured it out.
right. Like dyslexia,
Yeah.
okay, and there's a school for that. And then he can learn to read after. No, it's nothing like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's so hard. You know what? Like that's why MAPS, we're talking about MAPS later, is so great because they do CEUs and they educate pediatricians and pediatric specialists and all the medical aspects of autism. And that should be like a requirement, for any pediatrician, attend like one MAPS conference. It would
Hmm.
make such a difference.
Yeah. And, I think there's so much resistance within the medical community in general, primarily because, we know that it's a big conglomerate of,
Yeah,
pharmaceutical industry
right.
and education, and all of these
Hmm.
things work hand in hand, which then fund the research. And if you,
Hmm.
can't get funded, then what's the
Right,
point?
right. Yeah,
You know, but I think that's where the clinicians become even more important than the
yeah.
researchers, because
Hmm.
as clinicians, that's where you make the difference.
Yes,
So,
yes.
that's why I really appreciate the work that they're doing at MAPS and training new clinicians who then can go out and actually treat and care for patients. The research is important, of course. That's how we grow and learn new things and evolve. But if the research being done isn't, um, if the data is skewed, if the
Right,
sample size is skewed,
right.
for whatever reason, then we're not going to see the kinds of progress we would see.
No, we're not. We're not. And that's why we haven't. Uh, yeah. And also, I always wonder as a pediatrician or as a clinician, don't you get frustrated with all these people coming back and saying, okay, I did everything you said and there's no progress? I would find that to be incredibly frustrating. And so I
Yeah.
would welcome learning more. Um, but I think there's some psychological aspect, like when you say autism to a pediatrician, they're like genetic behavioral disorder, genetic, and they just shut it down
Mhm.
because it's a whole uncomfortable subject. Um,
Yeah, and I think that has to come from the vaccine conversation,
yes,
because otherwise I don't see why there would be such a resistance.
right. They're hardworking doctors and they don't make a lot of money comparatively to like radiology, and a pediatrician works a lot of hours. And these people care about kids. But I think their whole organization, the AAP and medical school and everybody is just nailed it to their head. Um, it's not vaccines. It can't be vaccines. Vaccines are always good. It's like a mantra. It's, like I think the health community did a great job with me growing up with smoking. It was nailed into our head all the time. Smoking causes cancer. Smoking causes cancer. So, and I became like a zealot, and I forced my mother to stop smoking because I was like, I had all that. Anyways, but I think that's what happens to them. They can't go there, and they
Mhm.
don't want to hurt kids. They don't even want to imagine that the stuff that they're doing could be hurting some kids. So therefore, it's always the patient's fault. Um, and the pediatrician whom I called, it's so weird. Like she didn't take any notes. The night I called like 3 times to report Christian had 103 fever, and this wasn't what she described could be happening. And later, when I get the medical records because I moved to the city, I looked at it. She didn't note anything. She didn't note that they don't. She didn't write anything down. Versus other times I'd call about like an earache or something, and they'd always record the call in detail. But it's just like that. It's like a mental block. They don't want to address the vaccine issue. Not at all. So
Well,
weird.
I think it's like you said. I think they're terrified that
Yeah.
something that they have done may have injured any
Yes.
child.
Right.
One child and maybe hundreds of children over
Right.
their career. So
Yes.
I do understand how, you know, debilitating that might be to
Yes.
make that acknowledgement, and how much grief and,
Yes. We live with that. I
frustration.
mean, I live with
Yeah.
that, not you, but I live with the fact that, I had a friend who's like, maybe you shouldn't vaccinate. I'm not vaccinating because there's kind of these stories. And I was like, bah, what does she know? So I live with the fact through my best efforts in parenting, I made a horrible mistake. And I don't understand why they can't. Well, they can't admit that either. They can't admit that, but yeah, you're right. They just can't.
Well, I think it disrupts their whole paradigm in
Yes,
some ways.
yes, yes. And they're overwhelmed by pharma. Like you go into their office and there's so much pharma stuff and the samples, and they were, taught that these are miracles, these vaccines, and I don't even think they're taught anything about the downsides or anything. And if there's an adverse reaction, they always believe it's 1 in a million. Like 1 in a million kids will die from an aspirin. That's true. So they just think, okay, that's a 1 in a million,
Mhm.
and they just it's very, very sad. Yeah, maddening too. Mhm.
Have you had conversations with some of the researchers at NIH about vaccines in particular?
No, you can't even get there. They will say asked and answered. And there's something interesting too that I found. People who are generally overconfident about their abilities and what they know tend to have discussions that don't go well with autism. It's because they'll be like, this is my conversation about Autism Speaks. They'd be like, okay, it's Hep B, it's been proven safe over and over. And I said, well, actually, there's only like 5 studies that are cited, and 2 are 50 years old, and the other 2, there was a safety surveillance going on for 48 hours. That's it. And I said, by everybody's account, this would never be okay today. That would not be sufficient evidence. And it's grandfathered in. And I said, and they didn't believe me. And of course, they went back. It's all true. And I said, is that enough to make you feel comfortable? 5 studies, 250 years ago, 2 surveilling for 48 hours. Is that really enough to make you feel safe that this should be given to every child? They were shocked. They were just shocked. They never questioned anything. They don't look at the research at all. They just say, so many studies have shown. Like Dana Bash last night with Bobby Kennedy. All right, Dana, let's see those studies that you know. Let's see them.
Right.
So, yeah. So,
Right. I mean, um, so for those of you who didn't watch it, Dana Bash was speaking with Secretary Kennedy about the measles vaccine, and she made several comments
oh
about,
my God.
measles vaccine being, whatever the mantra is,
He also
safe and
accused
effective.
Kennedy of causing vaccine hesitancy, which is
Right.
ridiculous. Mhm.
It's so interesting to me because, I see people even on the side of the conversation that we're coming from who
Mhm.
are very upset about Kennedy making comments saying that the efficacy of the measles vaccine he's never questioned.
Right.
And I think it's important to really note that there's a difference between safety and
Yeah.
efficacy. And
Yes.
according to the actual definition of efficacy,
Mhm.
we're looking at, does it produce an immune response?
That's it.
And that's it. There's
That's it.
nothing else.
That's
So
it.
his comment there is factual. Yes,
Yes.
the measles
Did you
vaccine,
die? Did the child die on the table? Is really
right,
the only thing that they would be measuring of time. Did you die like a second after the vaccine? That's the
right,
only thing. Yeah.
right.
He was
Yes.
terrible. Oh.
Yeah, it just it is funny because the vast majority of these arguments are an appeal to emotion. They don't ever have
Yes.
scientific data. It's
No.
just no, there's studies to prove it.
They
And
project onto us because they accuse parents you're being over emotional. And I'm like, I'm really not. I've had this conversation 100 times. And you can see they're so uncomfortable, so that it's like the parent is emotional, not thinking, looking for something to blame. And so like when I had that conversation with the Autism Speaks people about exactly what are the studies, they don't want to know. They just want to be. And so Dana, why doesn't she just call herself Dana? Dana was saying, like, they all exist. She couldn't cite one, and she was also, she was lying because she said she was impartial. She was sending Fauci questions for the interview days in advance. She was accepting questions from Fauci 2 hours to set them up. She's not impartial, so that's just not true.
yeah. So I'm curious, have you ever been in a situation where there was an uncomfortable interview with a confrontational person?
Oh God. I'm sure. I used to do a ton of interviews when I was trying to help Autism Speaks, and I'd see someone in the background saying, "Don't talk, don't talk about it, don't talk about it." And I didn't have an agenda. If they were promoting like special needs playgrounds or something, I don't need to like bust out vaccines, vaccine, vaccine. You know, but I told them I'm never going to lie, and that would be a huge problem. But yeah, when you're doing, most people who are doing an interview were just told what to believe, and they'll call Paul Offit,
Mhm.
and he will tell them all this stuff, and it's often very adversarial. But I would say to them, listen, it happened. It doesn't benefit me to have this nightmare in my child's life. There's nothing I get out of this. It was horribly painful for me to realize that I trusted people with my son's life and I was wrong. And I don't get upset. And I think they're seeing more and more like it's the other side that gets very upset. You're killing kids. You're doing very emotional, and they're unused to being challenged. So yeah, I think you're right. I think they get very emotional,
Hmm. Hmm.
and interviews are just the interviews usually just talk to off it. Mhm.
Right. Or they cut everything that
Yes,
happened with you and
yes,
just, defer to the experts, right?
yes, yes, yes. And then I would ask them sometimes. I mean, why do you think I'm in this? Like, what am I getting out of this? You know, there's nothing great about severe autism, and I'd show them the before and after video, um, and they're uncomfortable because
Yeah.
it challenges what they think to be true. They're very uncomfortable.
Well, Katie, I think the more people can see and understand, and the more that people like you and I can speak up for not only our children, but all of the children
Yeah.
with these diagnoses, I pray that it helps them
And no, they're
to,
not alone, because I
yes.
often felt like I was the only one who had a child with severe autism, and they're not, and I know they're just exhausted and they barely have time to use the bathroom or shower. And, I just want them to know we're all behind them. They're not alone. And we want their kids to get better.
100%. All right. So I ask every single one of my question or my guests 8 questions. These questions are designed to give us a little bit more information about who you are and what makes you tick. Are you
Okay,
ready?
sure,
All right.
sure.
Number one, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Um, Activated charcoal helped Christian a lot in the beginning. And I was mother told me about it. I'm like, I buy this at the natural food store and versus these $600 worth of drugs, and it's not helping. So I probably that one.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Detox, detox.
Yeah, right.
All right. Number two, tell us something most people don't know about you.
What do you know about me? Before this, I was a clinical director of a rape crisis center. So, I dealt with controversial stuff. And this is an analogy that's worth sharing. Yeah, and part of my job was they would have interns from medical school come and spend like 2 days at the rape crisis center. And it was especially good because about half of them were foreign. And no, I mean, we do a lot wrong, but we educate doctors a lot better about sexual assault and how to speak to patients. And it was very hard for some of them to talk about rape and talk, but I'm like, you're going to see a patient at some point who has been a victim of a sexual assault or rape, and you really need to get comfortable in a way, a non-blaming way, but in an effective way. And we were able to speak about this, and they got there. Versus, you know, um, it's crazy that I had these conversations with doctors about anal sex or whatever, or STDs, but to talk about vaccines is what's truly controversial.
Right. The product that they're actually injecting
Yes,
into people.
great, exactly.
All right, number 3, if I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest to be added?
Oh, I'm trying to think. Something I was really proud, my husband and I were proud of. We weaned Christian off the Wiggles. It was tough. It was really tough, but I was going to shoot myself. So he really likes Jack Johnson. Of happy music. And when he needs to calm down, it's like Enya. For me, happy music, he likes pop music, you know, he like I like the early Katy Perry songs. They're very funny, like You're Hot and Cold. Uh, just funny pop music. I remember that song, I think her name was Zara. I've had it, or oh God, what's that? Anyway, I'll think about it. But anything that's funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. All right, what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
Oh gosh. Um, it used to be a New York Housewives, that's for sure. I've got to get back into it, and it was so bad. I'd have like 1 hour a day to myself, and I would spend it watching that. So that probably my guilty pleasure. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. All right.
Totally, like there's no benefit from watching this. I learned nothing.
This is not an endorsement.
No, no. But is it entertaining to me? Yes. And did it take my mind completely off? Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right, right. That's the important part. All right. Number 5, what is the most influential book you've ever read?
God, probably. I mean, he's dead now, but David. Oh gosh, the first book about vaccines. God, I'm totally blanking out on the name, but it was the story of vaccines, and it was with Lynn Redwood and her husband and Laura Bono, and he did this huge study of evidence of harm,
Hmm.
evidence of
Hmm.
harm, and it's a very long book, but I learned so much from it, and I'm still so grateful because I wasn't able in the beginning. I'd read all these books about autism, and it was like nothing remotely like my son. And evidence of harm really covered it all. So I was so great. I was
Yeah.
sad to hear he recently died.
Yeah, well, I had the pleasure of sitting with Lynn at a MAPS dinner,
Oh,
and
nice.
I think it was last year, and it was just amazing to be able to speak to somebody who's been
I
such a
know.
staunch advocate for our kids.
She's such an
So,
inspiration, and
yeah,
she's been through such a rough time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
She
I
she
love
was
her.
amazing. All
Yeah.
right, what does the word revolution mean to you?
It means big change for the better. Like I like this group called Thinking Moms Revolution, where they talked about like we're going to change for the better, and people aren't going to like it, but it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
It's got to happen anyway.
Yeah, shout out to TMR. I wrote an article
Yeah,
for them a long time ago, but
I love them. It's a great name.
all right, what does the word remedy mean to you?
Remedy, I associate with like lessening symptoms and improving quality of life. It
Hmm.
maybe not be the whole remedy, but like when we found the remedy for the eczema, getting rid of the gluten, it wasn't the worst thing, but it was bad. And he would wake up at night scratching his cheeks, and just getting rid of gluten was like problem solved. That was to me like amazing. Um, that was a great remedy, and it doesn't have to be everything, but it really helped. So something I'm grateful for that helped.
Absolutely. And lastly, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
Trust yourself. If you're not getting help, keep going and talk to other parents. It's easier now because you can go online and watch a video from, Autism One. If try to find like what your GI issues, and watch a Dr. Arthur Kriegsman video and see if you can find somebody who you think, hey, that could help. Um, yeah, because if you're told that this will work and it's not working. You know better than anybody. So yeah, I would say trust yourself.
Absolutely. All right. So where can people find out more information about IAC and the work that
Yes.
Dr. Vogel's been doing?
Oh my God, she's so great. What we really need is for people who have a child on a spectrum or a brother or sister or who are a grandmother to go to IAC, IACC capital underscore, and then autismsmall.com, and they will be asking for comments. There's a new plan, and this is the first time in IAC plan, the first time the NIH has put out a plan to address regression, real medical issues. Pandas is in there, anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis, all these wonderful things. And if we don't get enough comments there, they will be able to say, well, nobody wants this done. So we all want this done. We want research on pandas and regression and environmental exposures. And it's all in the plan. So if you can just go there and say, you know, this is what my kid, doesn't have to be like a long thing, you use a couple sentences. This is what affects my child and I need to see it studied. You know, that's all. That would be very helpful.
Awesome. Well, Katie, it has been a pleasure connecting with you.
My pleasure, Erin. So delightful to meet you.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you again to Katie Wright, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
With hope as a guiding light, through darkest days we'll fight the night. With a whole lot of passion, with a whole lot of truth, Remedy Revolution is here for you.